Get out of my house." The words landed so hard that even the people standing in the driveway stopped breathing. Evelyn stood frozen beside the front door, one hand wrapped around a silver serving tray, the other trembling at her side. Her black uniform was perfectly pressed, but tears had already begun slipping down her cheeks. Across from her stood Marcus Vale, the 38-year-old CEO whose name appeared on business magazines and television screens. "You embarrass me in front of my investors," Marcus said coldly. "And now you expect me to believe you didn't steal that watch." "I didn't steal anything," Evelyn whispered. Marcus held up the expensive gold watch as if it were evidence in a courtroom. "Then explain why it was found in your room." Evelyn opened her mouth. Nothing came out. And that was the moment everyone decided she was guilty. "My name is Caleb Mercer, and I've heard plenty of stories about wealthy people losing their tempers. But what happened at the Vale estate that afternoon stayed with me because the person everyone treated like a criminal was the one person who had been protecting that family all along. If stories about dignity, kindness, and unexpected second chances mean something to you, take a second to subscribe to Kindness Corner too. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Then let's get back to Evelyn, because her silence that day wasn't weakness. It was sacrifice. 3 months earlier, Evelyn had started working for Marcus after leaving a hotel housekeeping job. She was quiet, dependable, and rarely complained. She knew which coffee Marcus liked, how his teenage daughter took her tea, and which medication his elderly father needed after breakfast. But Evelyn carried something nobody in that mansion knew about. Every Friday afternoon, she disappeared for exactly 2 hours. Marcus assumed she was visiting family. He never asked. What he didn't know was that Evelyn had a 14-year-old son named Noah, who lived with his grandmother across town. Noah had a heart condition. The boy's medical bills had swallowed nearly everything Evelyn earned. She took extra shifts whenever she could, skipped meals when money was tight, and never told Marcus how close she was to losing the apartment she shared with her son. Then, one rainy evening, Marcus's daughter Sophie collapsed near the staircase. Evelyn was the one who found her. She recognized the signs of a panic attack, stayed beside Sophie until the ambulance arrived, and held her hand the entire way to the hospital. Afterward, Sophie became attached to Evelyn. Marcus noticed. He just didn't understand why. "You don't have to call me Mrs. Vale," Evelyn once told Sophie with a small smile. "Just call me Evelyn." Sophie smiled back. "Okay, Evelyn." It was one of the few warm moments in that house. Then came the night of Marcus's investor dinner. Dozens of powerful guests filled the mansion. Expensive cars lined the driveway. Champagne glasses glittered beneath the chandeliers. Evelyn moved quietly through the crowd, serving dinner. Near the end of the evening, Marcus reached into his jacket. His gold watch was gone. The mood changed immediately. Security searched the house. 10 minutes later, the watch was found inside Evelyn's dresser drawer. She stared at it as if she'd never seen it before. "I swear that's not mine." Marcus's face hardened. "Security footage shows you entering your room 20 minutes ago." "I went to get clean towels." "And somehow my watch followed you." A few guests exchanged uncomfortable looks. Evelyn lowered her eyes. "I didn't take it." Marcus stepped closer. "You should be grateful I don't call the police." That was when Sophie pushed through the crowd. "Dad, stop." Marcus turned. "Sophie, go upstairs." "No." Her voice shook. "She wouldn't steal from us." Marcus looked embarrassed. "This is not your concern." Evelyn quietly touched Sophie's shoulder. "Please, sweetheart, go inside." But Sophie refused to move. Then a delivery truck pulled into the driveway. I was driving it. I had been delivering a replacement shipment for Marcus's company, and because the security gate had already been opened, I walked straight toward the entrance carrying a large cardboard box. I heard Marcus say, "This woman has no place in my home." I stopped. Then I looked at Evelyn. She looked back at me, and I recognized her. Not from the mansion. From the children's cardiac clinic. 6 months earlier, I'd delivered medical supplies there. Evelyn had been sitting beside a teenage boy in a wheelchair. The boy was Noah. I remembered because I'd accidentally dropped a box, and Evelyn had laughed and helped me pick everything up. But that wasn't the only thing I remembered. She had been wearing the same necklace she wore now. A tiny silver heart. I set the delivery box down. "Mr. Vale, I said. You need to hear me. Marcus frowned. This doesn't concern you. It does now. I reached into my truck and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a receipt. I had been asked to deliver a package to the clinic that morning. The recipient's name was Noah Carter. The package contained a cardiac device that had been purchased anonymously. The donor name on the paperwork was Marcus Vale. Evelyn's face went pale. Marcus stared at her. What is this? She shook her head. Please don't. But I continued. The device was paid for 3 months ago. Every payment came from an account connected to you. Marcus looked confused. Evelyn finally broke. I wasn't stealing from you. She wiped her tears. I was borrowing from the company. Marcus stared at her. Borrowing what? Nothing you could miss. Her voice cracked. When your father had surgery last year, I saw how much the hospital charged. I knew your family could afford it. My son couldn't. Marcus went silent. Evelyn explained that she'd discovered an employee assistance fund connected to Marcus's company. She had quietly submitted Noah's medical bills under an old program that employees were entitled to use. But there was a problem. The program required documentation Evelyn couldn't afford to provide quickly. So Marcus had personally covered the remaining cost without knowing who the child belonged to. Evelyn had recognized his name on the payment records. She could have told him. Instead, she kept quiet because she was terrified he'd think she was manipulating him. The watch, she said, had been planted in her room. Then Sophie spoke. I know who did it. Everyone turned. She pointed toward Marcus's head of security. He came into Evelyn's room before dinner. The security guard's face changed. Marcus stared at him. Is that true? The man hesitated. Then he confessed. He had planted the watch because he'd been stealing small valuables from guests and needed someone else to blame before security cameras caught him. Marcus looked at Evelyn. For the first time, the anger was gone. What remained was shame. I accused you, he said quietly. Evelyn didn't answer. I humiliated you. Still nothing. Marcus swallowed. I was wrong. Evelyn finally looked at him. You were. 2 simple words. They hurt more than shouting would have. Marcus dismissed the security guard and later paid Evelyn's overdue wages, but she refused the extra money. What she accepted was something far more important. An apology. Not just privately. Marcus stood in front of the same employees and guests who had watched Evelyn being accused and admitted exactly what he'd done. He also created a permanent emergency medical fund for every employee in his company. But Evelyn never became a celebrity in that mansion. She remained Evelyn. She still made coffee in the mornings. She still checked on Marcus's father. And every Friday, she visited Noah. The difference was that she no longer had to hide why. Months later, Noah's health improved enough for him to attend a small dinner at the Vale house. Marcus shook his hand at the door. I owe your mother more than I can ever repay, he told him. Noah smiled. You can start by not yelling at her. For the first time that evening, everyone laughed. And Evelyn did too. Because sometimes the greatest secret a person can carry isn't a crime. Sometimes it's the quiet amount of pain they've endured just to keep the people they love safe. Marcus had thought Evelyn needed his mercy. In the end, he discovered that he was the one who needed hers. And if there's one thing I hope you remember from this story, it's this. Never mistake someone's silence for guilt. You may be looking at a person carrying a burden you know nothing about. If Evelyn's story touched you, share your thoughts below. And if you enjoy stories where kindness finds its way through difficult places, stay with Kindness Corner 2 for the next one.